Well, hi there. Well, December 31st, 2019 not only meant the end of a year, but it was also the end of a decade. And on today's show, I want to take a look at what I believe are the top infectious disease news stories of the decade 2010 to 2019. And I encourage you to comment below and let me know if you think I'm doing a pretty good job with that, or am I off base? Is there anything I missed? Should the order be changed? Let me know in the comments below. But in the meantime, let me go ahead and get started. And I pretty much listed my top 9, and then I smattered in there a few honorable mentions. So let's take a look. Well, number 9, I called the first Naegleria fowler survivors in the United States in 35 years. Big story back in 2013. And of course, primary amoebic meningoencephalitis, or PAM, is a nearly always lethal infection of the central nervous system. And from 1962 to 2018, there were more than 145 cases. So it's somewhere between 145 and 150 at the end of 2019. Not a very common thing, but a very lethal thing, with about 98% case fatality rate with this parasite. Now, prior to 2013, the last survivor was in 1978, 35 years earlier. However, in 2013, 2 patients survived the very fatal amoebic infection. And the first one was 12-year-old Kaylee Hardig from Arkansas. She made a full neurological recovery and returned back to school not long after being infected. Now, her recovery has been attributed to early diagnosis and treatment and the novel therapeutics that included this drug, miltefosine, and hypothermia. The number 8 story of the decade I called cholera in Haiti. And if you can remember back on January 12th, 2010, a large earthquake hit Haiti and it killed and injured hundreds of thousands of people. Then about 10 months later, sometime in October of 2010, a cholera outbreak was confirmed in Haiti, and they biotyped it to be this cholera serogroup O1 biotype Ogawa as the strain. In the first 2 years alone, more than 600,000 cases were reported, more than half required hospitalization, and almost 7,500 fatalities were reported in Haiti in just the first 2 years. Fast forward the clock 9 years later, there's been over 800,000 cases and nearly 10,000 fatalities over the course of the decade. Fortunately, the numbers of cases reported in 2019 were very few. However, as UN Special Envoy Josette Sheeran wrote in November 2019, quote, "Although Haiti is in the home stretch of defeating a cholera outbreak first declared 9 years ago, the battle is far from over before the country is free of the deadly disease." Number 7. I didn't know if I should make this higher or not, but I put that at 7, and that's India became polio free. And that occurred on the last case of polio, wild polio virus in India, was on January 13th, 2011, when a 2-year-old girl in West Bengal state contracted polio. Now, this was a major milestone because there's a lot of people that thought they may never see this happen in India. And just as early as 1985, India saw 150,000 polio cases just in that 1 year. And as recently as 2009, India accounted for half of the polio cases worldwide. But they haven't seen it in 8 years now, going on 9 years. And thanks to the mobilization of millions across the country and the billions of dollars invested for a mass eradication program that was set out to give every child under 5 the oral polio vaccine, India did achieve polio-free certification in 2014. Number 6 was the H7N9 avian influenza outbreak in China. The first human cases were reported in March 2013 in China. And since that time, the virus has seen multiple waves or epidemics, resulting in more than 1,500 human cases and a case fatality at about 40%. Very, very dangerous, lethal disease. Of that 1,500 plus cases, 31 were imported from China to several other countries, predominantly Hong Kong. According to the World Health Organization's Assistant Director for Health, Security, and the Environment, Keiji Fukuda, who said in 2013, quote, "This is definitely one of the most lethal influenza viruses we have seen so far." Number 5 was the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome virus, MERS. MERS was first reported in Saudi Arabia in 2012, and since that time has affected people in 27 different countries, 10 on the Arabian Peninsula, and 17 travel-associated countries outside of the Arabian Peninsula. Since the first cases were reported in 2012 through November of last year, about 2,500 laboratory-confirmed cases of MERS has been reported and over 850 deaths. And the cases and the fatalities are, the bulk of them are reported out of Saudi Arabia. Number 4, the 2009-2010 H1N1 Pandemic. Now, this influenza pandemic began in the decade prior, the 2000 to 2009 decade. However, it did stretch into 2010, and the numbers were really, really big. In the U.S. alone, from April 12th, 2009 to April 10th, 2010, the Centers for Disease Control estimated that there were 61 million cases, 250,000 hospitalizations, and 12.5 thousand fatalities from this influenza virus. That was just in the U.S. The CDC also estimates that between 150 and 575,000 people worldwide died from H1N1 infection during the first year the virus circulated. And this was an unusual virus, as the majority of the people that died were people younger than 65, which is unusual for an influenza virus. Number 3, the Zika virus epidemic in the Americas. In May of 2015, public health authorities of Brazil confirmed local transmission of Zika virus in the northeastern part of the country. The incidence of Zika spread throughout the Americas, South America, Central America, the Caribbean, and into North America. It peaked in 2016, and then it declined quite rapidly throughout 2017 and 2018. Zika virus transmission has been reported in all countries in the region of the Americas, except mainland Chile, Uruguay, and Canada. While Zika virus is generally mild, it was soon discovered that complications could be quite serious. Zika virus infection during pregnancy is a cause of microcephaly and other congenital abnormalities in the developing fetus and newborn. Zika infection in pregnancy also results in pregnancy complications such as fetal loss, stillbirth, and preterm birth. The infection also triggered Guillain-Barré syndrome, neuropathy, myelitis, particularly in adults and older children. And research continues on Zika virus and the multitudes of different complications that go along with it. Number 2, the cholera outbreak in Yemen. Now, this cholera outbreak became the largest and the fastest spreading outbreak of the disease in modern history during this past decade. The outbreak surpassed Haiti as the biggest since modern records began in 1949. The cumulative number of suspected cholera cases reported in Yemen since October 2016 through November 2019 is 2.2 million, including almost 4,000 fatalities. Now, the country experienced a second wave of the outbreak starting April 27, 2017, and that's where we saw the bulk of the cholera cases and fatalities from 2017 through today. How did this all happen? Well, years of fighting between the Saudi-led coalition and Houthi rebels really crippled the country. And this caused widespread internal displacement, a collapse of the public health and sanitation system. 2/3 of the population did not have access to clean water and sanitation, which obviously leads to a massive outbreak like we saw in Yemen over the past several years. And finally, number 1, the West Africa Ebola outbreak. In early 2014, the World Health Organization reported cases of Ebola virus disease in southeastern Guinea. Now, because of crowded urban areas, increased mobilization across borders, conflicts between key infection control practices, and different cultural and traditional practices, this really saw Ebola spread through the neighboring countries of Liberia and Sierra Leone and beyond. We eventually saw it in places like Nigeria, Senegal, and we saw a case pop up here in the United States. In August 2014, the World Health Organization finally declared a public health emergency of international concern. And after all said and done, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea were declared Ebola-free in June 2016, but not after a record of more than 28,000 cases and more than 11,000 fatalities, making this by far the largest Ebola outbreak ever. And let me go ahead and close with some honorable mentions, things I didn't put on the actual list, but I could have. And the chikungunya outbreak in the Americas, particularly in 2014. Just a couple years ago, the plague outbreak in Madagascar, where several thousand people contracted plague and hundreds died. This past year, the global measles outbreak has really culminated to this large outbreak that we haven't seen in some time. And of course, lastly, the 2018, I guess I should have put to the 2020 Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which continues to this day, which is the second largest Ebola outbreak ever. Okay, that's the list. Tell me what you think. I'd love to hear more about it down below. Go ahead and comment, like the video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time on Outbreak News TV.